In fact, there was a time recently for a little while when we had negative oil prices, when the world ran out of places to store oil. On the other hand, when you look at the two biggest consumers of oil, you have India and China. So here we have 4 leaders from India who are doing extensive work in oil and gas to talk about immersive technologies in oil and gas industry. We have specifically chosen the leaders that there is a good representation of leaders from the demand side, leaders from the supply side, as well as leaders from the consulting side who cover both demand and supply. So with us we have today Ritvik, who's a senior leader with HPCL, also known as Hindustan Petroleum, who's now, after long service in technology, is now looking after strategy and more forward-looking operation and function, not exactly operations, but perspectives in regard to the company. He is from the demand side. We have Manoj, who is from a joint venture between 2 corporate groups, HPCL and well as Mittal's, another energy company, and he is the head of IT for this particular group. So he, in a sense, is the representative of the business from a technology perspective. Then we've got Suhas. Suhas is a veteran of the industry, having worked with Larsen & Toubro in senior leadership positions, and at the moment is in the consulting space where he has good insights both from demand as well as from supply perspective as well as from a technology perspective. And last but not the least, we have a young gentleman, Gaurav, who is a representative of the technology, the energy and the enthusiasm of wanting to rechange the world, and from a solution provider's perspective into immersive technologies. So let's kick off the session, and I'll start first with Ritvik. Ritvik, coming from the demand side, what do you see as the trend insofar as immersive technologies are concerned in oil and gas industry? So over to you.
Yeah, Pradeep, at the outset, thank you for the introduction. It's lovely to be part of such a panel. And I come from a company which is into midstream and downstream oil and gas production, refining, and marketing. So traditionally, AR and VR, which are the typical mainstays of the immersive technologies, have been used as supplements for the traditional training equipment, okay, or training methodologies. When we have wanted to graduate beyond the PowerPoints and the videos, in some areas these have been implemented. But as I say it, even the oil and gas company, and also in India very specifically, are waking up to the potential of these technologies and seeing a lot of value coming out of that. And if I may say so on behalf of my brethren, I think the areas that people are looking into and actively exploring are in operations, in maintenance, in safety. I think safety has become a very important item where people are seeing the usage of AR and VR. And slowly we are also getting into the marketing space. We are not so customer savvy a few years back, but recently we have started focusing on them, and I see a huge role of the immersive technologies in the marketing space as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Now I want to move on to Manoj, who's also from the demand side. Manoj Ritvik has given some functional areas where VR, AR can be used. Now, would you like to add upon something that he has said? And I also want you to actually comment that while Ritvik has mentioned areas where AR, VR can be used, I would like to hear from you about areas where AR, VR are actually being used. So, two
Okay.
parts of the question. One is to add on where they could be potentially used, and number two is where they are actually being used.
Okay. Thanks, Pradeep, to get us on this panel discussions. Just to add on, what Ritvik said about augmented reality and virtual reality. The virtual reality, in my opinion, the biggest use is the training. In today's world, training does not matter. In my opinion, effectiveness of the training matters. How you judge the effectiveness of the training. We all are getting trained for so many years, but hardly I've seen the effectiveness of the training is getting judged. Using the virtual reality technology, we can see how effective that training is to whomever we have given that training. And in any area, whether it is maintenance or operations, safety, and number of opportunities are there. The second possibility which I see is we, in our refineries, we have our operators training simulators, OTS, operators sit and simulate, but we do not know what's getting happen on the field. Integration of operators training simulator with virtual reality, I see a big possibility to increase the effectiveness of the simulation. So these are the two possibilities which I see. On the augmented reality side, I'll talk about the challenge later. If we can get the real-time data for our machines, compressor, equipment in visualized form, okay, subject to network, that I believe is the biggest bottleneck at this point of time to use augmented reality in the unit, it will increase the effectiveness of the operator. So these are the possibility which I see. To answer your question, where it is getting used, I need to be honest and candid. It is in the training. As HML, we have started our journey, and at least for another 6 months or year till we have the network in our units, etc. I see this is the biggest potential area in any refinery.
I appreciate your sharing insights in a frank manner. So because that is what the state of play is, and I'm not surprised because this is what I see across a number of industries where the demand side is still understanding what are the use cases where we should use immersive technologies. So thank you for that. Suhas, insofar as you are concerned, you come across both demand and supply. So what do you see? Because I'm talking to Manoj and Ritvik from a demand perspective, and I'll come to Gaurav from a supply perspective. But what do you see in the consulting space, especially considering that people or industries need a helping hand to better understand the technology and the use cases of the technology, and as well as whom to contact for what kind of solutions?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, thanks Pradeep for the opportunity and a very nice perspective provided by my two colleagues, Ritvik and Manoj, on the demand side, or what is their view of where these technologies can be used in their business operations. Yeah, looking at the overall trends in the way this technology is being used, the way it's being adopted, let's understand the ecosystem that involves both the VR, AR technology side as well as the user side. And here we are going to talk about oil and gas as the user industry. So on VR, AR side, you have the technology creators, then you have the hardware manufacturers, the content creators, and the solution providers who provide the solutions to the potential users. Oil and gas, in terms of its value chain, is a very complex value chain. It starts with explorators, exploring and production of the oil and gas as reservoirs. Then you have the pre-processing, the processing, the refining, petrochemical production, fertilizer production, LNG. These are all the whole lot of processes which take place in the oil and gas value chain. And then there are several and multitude of stakeholders. You have the owner companies, you have the licensors, you have the EPC contractors, you have manufacturers, construction companies. And they're all part of the oil and gas value chain. And they all have business functions which can be very well supported by technologies like VR and AR. So you have on one side the technology creators, and on the other side you have the oil and gas stakeholders as users, potential users. And the trend that I'm seeing globally is that the international companies, such as the oil companies who have presence all over the world, there are about 15 of these companies. Then you have the large global EPC companies or the process licensing companies who have presence all over the world, and they bring in very unique value from their own experience. So they have adopted this technology in a very aggressive way, and they have been reaping benefits, and they definitely are the front runners. And being early adopters, they have already started experimenting with these potential applications, and they are gaining benefits in terms of reduced time for a particular activity, or better support provided from remote locations, or more effective training. Training is another thing that Manoj mentioned. Very effective training because of the immersive nature of the technology. Now, going forward, it's very important for the technology side, the solution providers and the potential users in the regions, in different parts of the regions in the world. I'm seeing local players they have not yet adopted to this technology in as aggressive a way as a global. So in specific regions, including India, I think it will be very important for solution providers and the potential users to get together, identify specific applications, develop a proof of concept, going for implementation now in individual solutions, and look at parameters which can be measured, monitored, and the benefits can be assessed. Then that becomes a value. That becomes a value proposition for a particular solution to be adopted. So looking at this trend, I think going forward, one can consider this very positively in terms of adopting this technology and benefiting operations.
Thank you very much, Suhas. And Gaurav, I want to pick up on some of the themes that Suhas mentioned. And he mentioned about that the global majors have already started using immersive technologies quite well. And now I want to pick up your brains also, because you worked in the Middle East with some of the oil majors and you've done some work with them. So do you want to share some insights as to what kind of work were you involved with the oil majors in Middle East?
Definitely. Thank you, Pradeep. And thank you, everybody. I'm thrilled to be part of this panel. I'll start with what Manoj had said, and I'm completely in agreement with Manoj that virtual reality is already being accepted in oil and gas industry, particularly from the training perspective. Use cases which we have particularly done as a POC in Middle East, some of the use cases are orientation of new employees. So a new employee is provided a guided tour of a typical oil refinery and its processes, or making a field engineer aware of a typical well site, or training a field engineer to operate on a Christmas tree are some of the typical use cases which industry is adapting at a very fast pace. Now, with the ability to create detailed 3D models of complex machinery and its processes, as Manoj have said, it can only help field engineers and users to gain the knowledge in advance before they goes into the operation. This just add values to the operation. Now, coming to the augmented reality technology, as now augmented reality technology is also picking up. So it is right now in adoption phase. And some of the use cases which we have catered as POC to our clients are remote access, maintenance and supports and operation, and troubleshooting of device faults. So these are some of the typical use cases which we have catered as augmented reality use cases in oil and gas industry. Now in current situation, in current pandemic situation where people are working from home, SME cannot travel to the field right away, you can see the power of this remote assistance, how it can fit into the operation side. So a particular person, a subordinate in a field engineer can wear a AR headset, goes in the refinery or goes in the field, and he stands in front of a typical machinery which has some fault. Maybe another use case is he's on that machinery to do some maintenance and support activity running through some of the SOPs. Now, if we can provide real-time data via some IoT devices or via some servers, if we can provide some real-time IoT data to the AR headset, you can see how it can add value to the whole system. You know, he can run through the SOPs. He has the whole world as a canvas in front of him. Machinery, he can use that data to operate on that machine, troubleshoot that machine, do some checklist items. So this AR is opening up a whole new paradigm of use cases in the oil and gas industry. And as Suhas said, I think the trend now is adapting this AR, VR use cases to the local market, particularly in Asia Pacific and India. I think that will be a way to go forward.
Okay, thank you very much. And I want to go back to you, Ritvik. And really, you see, what is happening in the COVID situation at the moment is that either there is hyperactivity in certain areas who are really, in a sense, the frontline workers, whether it be health, whether it be police, or whether it be, any other emergency services, or there is very minimum level of activity because most of the people are operating from home. If they have roles and job functions where they can't do remotely, there's nothing that they can do. And as we emerge from these lockdowns, we've caught a situation where there may be potentially scarcity of skill sets, to run operations. May not necessarily be those emergency operations, of course they are the ones, but even critical operations of maintenance and for getting a plant running. So how do you think immersive technologies can help you in this situation?
Yeah, Pradeep, it's a very valid question. And if I go back to what Suhas and Gaurav were talking about, COVID actually, I may be sounding a little off track and not in consonance with a lot of other people. If we talk about a post-COVID scenario, then I think it definitely gives a significant push to adoption of a lot of digital technologies. So while I'm saying that, why it is so is that if you look at what COVID is doing to all of us, and I'm sure it's not going to go away in a short while. The first thing is the travel will be restricted. People will not venture out as much as they were doing. The second thing which is going to happen is the distancing. I don't subscribe to the term social distancing. Actually, I think in some cases, COVID has brought us socially together. We're rediscovering a lot of old relations. But the physical distancing is what is going to stay. And what it brings to an industry like oil and gas. If you look at almost all our locations, they're typically continuous process industry kind of locations. So what happens is we are very, what I would say, deeply involved in discussing about reducing the manpower on field. And when that happens, it brings with it a significant amount of risk. A risk in terms of not getting expert support on the ground, not having some supervisor looking over you and providing you guidance as and when needed, and also running the whole setup through a reduced manpower. So when we see this, I think augmented and virtual reality are the technologies which have a significant play in addressing a lot of these issues. So not only in terms of, like I remember Manoj or Gaurav talking about it, aided maintenance over a remote. The second thing is that we have a lot of senior people who would possibly be operating out of their own residences, so guiding the juniors during the process. And I think another area where the immersive technologies can focus is on the wearables, because we would definitely like to equip our workforce with as much of technology enablement as possible, rather than depending on the traditional ways of guidance and support.
Very good comments. Now, moving on to Manoj. Manoj, very often as the head of IT, you are the business representative in terms of how best to use technology. And the technology can be mainstream technology, technology can be emerging technology. And within emerging technology, there are also a wide range. You have IoTs, you have blockchain, you've got immersive technologies, and then there's a whole lot floating around. So does that kind of make life difficult for you in terms of choosing which emerging technology to use? Or is the business case straight away in certain cases? How do you balance out the use of emerging technologies?
A very, very valid point, Pradeep. Just to add, you have not mentioned a step, in the IT journey, which is to make the light on. Day-to-day operation is also a task. Forget the implementation of new technology or the emerging technology. We all spend a time in running day-to-day operations, whether it is a day-to-day network, laptops, servers, video conferencing, etc., etc. So that itself is a task. Then if time, you're left with some time, then you look for the implementation of the emerging technology. And now I consider it's part and partial of any job, where you need to balance it out between your day-to-day and the new. You need to take as a progressive organization, you need to take the organization to the next level. So in the emerging technology also, you always have there are 4 dimensions: tangible, intangible, immediate, and long term. So that's how today, if you go for some approvals, of course you need time, money, team to implement any new technology. And we all need, whether we like it or not, everybody looks from the return per se, how soon you will be able to get, how soon you can get the payback period, return on investment, etc., etc. Finance people has made our life a bit difficult. Despite that, I also come from a finance background. So keeping that thing in mind, technologies like industrial Internet of Things, advanced analytics, robotic process automation, they take precedent over augmented reality, virtual reality. Because if you see this aspect, augmented reality, virtual reality, it is more long-term perspective, changing the behavior per se, the way getting things done. So it's difficult, but I will not say we are not moving ahead at a geographical level, at an industry level in oil and gas. We have identified this immersive technology as one of the emerging technology in our strategy. But but it has its own pace. It's not that if you are not doing something, somebody will come and push you that why you are not doing something on the virtual reality. It's more selling. You need to do more selling than the buying from the user community or from the other department per se. We want to do this. So that also are reality.
Very good points. And I absolutely recognize the fact that a CIO's role today is more to make sure that the boxes are running and to do within the cost budgets which are assigned, and a lot of money is getting more into people resources and to make sure that the software upgrades are happening and so on and so forth. And it leaves little bandwidth and time to start looking at something which potentially could add further problems. It doesn't work well. So that is the reality. I understand that. Thank you very much. Now, Suhas, do you see that there is an information asymmetry between demand and supply? And on one hand, demand seems to be aware that, kind of vaguely, yes, we know that immersive technology can be used. On the other hand, when I look at the sheer number of companies in AR, VR from content perspective, I get surprised because there are maybe about 2,500 companies in India alone. There are about 2,000 companies in Australia. And, I personally know about 600 to 700 companies in India. Is there so much work that there are such a large number of companies? So on one hand, you've got so many small companies. On the other hand, the demand is kind of, yes, VR, AR is there. So what is happening? Is there an information asymmetry? Is there an imperfect market?
I think what you said, that is the term that you have used, information as asymmetry. Yes, I think that's a very, very valid and very appropriate term because the fact of the matter is that while on one side you have substantial and very fast-paced development taking place on the technology side, the new technologies, the technologies are getting refined, the hardware features are getting refined, the head-mounted devices are becoming lighter and having much stronger features, And likewise, the solution providers, content creators are combining all these features to provide a very effective solution to a potential user. On the other side, the user industry or the user community or stakeholders, let's talk about oil and gas. So the stakeholders in oil and gas sector, the awareness of the new technologies is largely today restricted, as far as the smaller and regional companies are concerned, is restricted to the IT group, the people who are driving digitalization in their respective companies. But the users are not going to be the IT group. The users are going to be the actual operators, the business people, the site people, the project people. And their knowledge level perhaps today is not that high. So in order to overcome this information asymmetry paradigm or the problem that we face, is how do you bring up the awareness of not just individual pockets who are involved in steering the initiative, but also the potential larger scale users, because ultimately they are the ones who need to be convinced that yes, this is a good technology, this is a good solution, and they should adopt and they should get into it. Number two, the tipping point, as you said, this information asymmetry is basically coming from the gap between the supply side and the demand side. On one side, as you said, there are hundreds of small size or medium size solution providers, and they're all over the country, and there are many in the world. The availability of these solutions, how do these solutions reach the right consumers, the right potential users or potential clients? So the outcome of the people who have deployed these technologies, what is the outcome? I think the awareness of the benefits that these people have managed to get and how they are implementing these into their business processes, maybe that needs to be brought out. Maybe a role can be played by the association to bring up such information for the consumption of potential users. Number two, what Ritwik also mentioned, and Gaurav also mentioning, the pandemic situation today. In today's pandemic situation, the technologies are playing a very great role. People who have adopted the technology, they already have a ready tool available to implement these solutions, for such as training. Today, people are not available, so the new people need to be trained. So this platform is already available. The training of the new people can be done very effectively using this platform. The people who have not got this platform, they will have to wait, or they will have to start implementing the platform. People who have already implemented remote assistance, and somebody who is working at site who doesn't have the expertise, he's supported by a person who is sitting somewhere in the world but who is not able to travel. So again, this is a situation of the pandemic which can become a very easy reference for some other people to look at the people who have adopted and see what the benefit they're getting. So the information asymmetry, I think, will go away. The situation of the pandemic that we are facing today, I'm sure, will be a good mechanism by which people will appreciate the benefits of adopting such technology.
Good. Thank you very much. Some very, very good points I heard from you. Now, I want to go to Gaurav. Gaurav, see, what is happening is, like I mentioned, there are thousands of companies which are operating in any geographical location into immersive technologies. But the fact of the matter is that on one hand, the revenue pipeline is not very uniform. You've got lumpiness, there's a project which comes through, and there could be times when there are no projects in that particular direction. And when you look at the delivery side, you require niche skills like 3D modeling, Unity, UI, UX, etc. And getting the right resource at the right time, at the right place, at the right cost can become a challenge. So in terms of balancing all this is always a challenge for a startup. Yes,
Yep.
some of the business models that I see at the moment are twofold. One is that startups which are only focused on VR AR, and the second is that who got some other line of business and they're also into VR AR. And obviously, the people who are already doing something else and have got revenue from somewhere else are much better off because they are not kind of literally thrown at the nuances of the marketplace. So when I look at you, and I'm quite aware that you've got another line of business where you're supporting people in terms of, managed services, IoT, and all that kind of a thing. But the question I really have for you is that, in wanting to scale up, what do you think could help you? Is it market access? Is it capital access? Or is it more delivery access, which means access to resources, because this is a people business to a large extent, or maybe even the head-mounted devices, because availability of head-mounted devices is also a challenge in India. So over to you.
I think everything, Pradeep, to be in short, we need everything. So as you said, you are aware of the model in which we had been working. So we started somewhere in 2016 with a passion to do something in AR and VR. And luckily, we understood very early that this technology is an adoption phase. It is an emerging technology. It is an adoption phase. We cannot completely bet on this technology as a startup. So what we did is we have started an alternate revenue stream from the conventional IT services and enterprise services and solutions, so that we can fund our passion of AR and VR stuff. There are definitely challenges, and if I can tell you from my personal experience of last 4 years, there are definitely challenges in this particular industry from the supplier perspective. Right from the top, there is a difference between demand and supply. So unless and until there is no demand, there is no point in creating solution and putting it forward. Those solution becomes stale, nobody is using that, and you have invested your resources and time into that, and nobody is using that. You are not getting any ROI from the supply perspective also. If I talk about the demand side of it, demand will happen when a particular solution will add value to their existing portfolio. So if an IT solution is not adding value to Manoj or Ritvik in their IT infrastructure, why would they adopt that particular solution? But I think way back, 5 years back, AR, VR is a different story. Today, it is a different story. And after a few years, it's going to be a different story. Particularly from my perspective, from our perspective, from our experience, if you see, accessing the market is definitely an issue. We as a startup cannot approach a big company like Manoj and Ritvik. They are the big players in oil and gas industry. We cannot approach directly to them. As Manoj mentioned, they go through a process of, a lot of paperwork and all those stuff. So you cannot have a startup coming and telling them, we have a solution, can you take it? We have to build a credibility over a time, which we are doing over the year. And everything will start as a POC. So I think those POCs can fill the gap over there in the market access place. Then when it comes to hardware, all the AR solutions which we are talking about, the hardware part of it is very expensive. And there are a lot of hardwares which are coming into the market. So even gathering all those different type of hardware in your portfolio in itself is a capital drain out for a startup. So, this is a process which we had been doing, time and again. We add new hardwares in our portfolio. And lastly, on the other side, developing a solution. As you have mentioned, finding people to create an AR solution at this point of time, you don't find conventional coders to provide an AR solution. They are fine with developing, conventional enterprise IT solutions. But for AR, VR, now colleges, educational institutes, all those are also learning that AR, VR is an emerging technology, and they are grooming the students. So now we are going to get a lot of students, not those people who are passionate about AR, VR, but now we are getting a lot of people who want to build their careers in AR, VR technology. So as you can see, right from demand to supply, there are challenges. Definitely there are challenges, and there are ways to overcome for the challenges. I think from the marketplace perspective, this VR ARA community is giving a platform to 2,500 companies in India and 2,000 companies in Australia and many more in the world. They are providing a platform so that they can showcase their work to the people in the industry, like in oil and gas industry, to showcase their work, what they have done. And hopefully in coming days, oil and gas industry will adopt these solutions which they have created. They can give it a shot.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, in view of the time, I was going to ask each one of you to kind of give 2 minutes takeaway but considering the time, I will have to do a key summary in 1 or 2 minutes myself, and then go over to the audience for questions. Now, fundamentally, as I see the business environment today, we are heading into COVID and the post-COVID situation, where because of the downturn of the economy, there are going to be severe cost pressures, and businesses will be under pressure to minimize cost as much as they can. And at the same time, it will take a bit of a time for the revenues to start flowing through at the same speed they were doing earlier. At the same time, there will be, with the aging of the population, with a lot of people kind of not being well, etc., there is going to be skill shortages. So all this is actually, provides a great opportunity for different stakeholders from industry, academia, demand, supply to work together and look at the wide range of opportunities which are there and help with a strong business focus to help them in their journey. So technology by itself is nothing but an enabler. And really, we've got to see that, whether in terms of onboarding solutions, which, some of the panel members have mentioned, whether it is in terms of skilling of specific skill sets, whether it is in terms of, helping remote maintenance, bugs, fixing those bugs, whether it is in training, whether it is in marketing, there is a large number of activities. I think to my mind, this is the group, let's kind of get together and combine, form a community and take this forward. So with that, we will now head over and take some questions from the audience.